Hello, VC. Bradley here. I'm ready to play some vinyl tag for 2018. Question number one. What is the first video you saw in the VC? If not the first video, one of the first was on a channel by Paul Baraka P-Dub. I ran across his videos somehow, and he had a few that were about jazz, kind of like an introduction to jazz. And since I started collecting last year, recollecting vinyl, I wanted to dive headfirst into jazz. So he had a lot of suggestions on possible albums to get. And I learned that his taste in jazz was very similar to mine, more of the hard bop from the mid-50s to the mid-60s. So it worked out pretty good. I appreciate his input, and right now I think I can find my own way on my journey to jazz. So I do appreciate his comments. Number two, favorite record you saw on VC and bought. I cannot remember what channel it was. I've always liked Jack White. I only have like 3 CDs, White Blood Cells by White Stripes, and a couple Raconteur albums or CDs. But anyhow, I saw Lazaretto by Jack White. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with this album. It's got all kind of little odd gimmicks on it, which makes a very interesting album. A hologram, first side plays inside out, hidden songs underneath the label. It goes on and on. So anyhow, and you also get a digital download with the album. And the digital version, it sounds different because there was no compression at all used on the vinyl album. So it's 2 different sounds, but very good. It's fun to play for friends. Number 3, what are your other hobbies? I have a Hammond organ, a digital Hammond organ, and I like playing that. I've always liked recording my own music. To be honest, in the last few years I have not, but I'm definitely going to get back into that. I love baseball, MLB. I'm a history and politics junkie. I always have been from when I was really young, although that politics part gets a little harder each year I get older. Number 4, why did you start to collect? I would say the Beatles. I was 9 years old when they first appeared on the Ed Sullivan show, and you know, immediately I was a Beatles fan. And then of course you had all the British invasion bands coming in: Dave Clark 5, Animals, Rolling Stones, Herman's Hermits, on and on. So I really, but the Beatles is what pushed me. And so I bought vinyl albums from when I was, in junior high school, up to, so we're talking about late 60s to the early 90s. And then I kind of switched over to CDs like so many other people. And just last year in 2017, I've gotten back into buying vinyl. And most of it is jazz, what I buy today. But I'll buy other genres too. Number 5, do you play an instrument or are you in a band? Like I said, I play keyboards. Play a little bit of guitar. You know, I know some, I can play folk songs pretty good, you know, rhythm and simple chords. I was in several bands in my past. The first band I was in, actually, I started pretty late being in a band. I was probably close to 28 years old or around there before I was in my first band. And I had an old Vox Continental organ, which I started out on. I still have it. It's vintage. Anyhow, that was around 1985 or so, 84. And actually that band I was in, we were called Major, which, show you a couple pictures. There out in front of one of our haunts. That's me right there. And there's another picture. Little publicity pictures. There's me. Anyhow, in 1985, I believe, we recorded a 45 at Sweetwater Sound in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Back then, Sweetwater was a one-man operation. Now they have a huge facility and they employ 1,100 people over at that facility. And I'll make a video on Sweetwater one of these days. But anyhow, the CD, like I said, we were called Major. Come On Baby, I wrote that. And on the flip side is She's Irresistible. I co-wrote that. So that was a very fun time of my life. We had a lot of fun. Number 6. Have you ever worked in a record store? No, I have not. When I was younger, you know, in the back of my mind, I always thought it would be so neat to own a record store, you know. But as time went on, you know, we have other things going in, and then I started getting into band and recording my own music and all that. So, no, I've never worked in a music store. Number 7, favorite album from the year you were born in. I was born in 55. I've looked through my collection and I actually don't have any albums from 1955, even the jazz albums. I have a few earlier and a lot of them right after that. So I'm going to kind of cheat here. I do have this. It's Elvis Presley's 50 Greatest Hits, which there are several songs on here that were released in 55. Blue Suede Shoes, Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel, maybe All Shook Up, I don't know. Anyhow, there's a story behind this album. About 6 months ago, I was buying a lot of records online from this one very large music retailer, and who will remain nameless. So anyhow, I ordered 6 jazz albums from this company, and the package came, and I thought the package seemed a little bit thicker than what it should be. So anyhow, I opened it up, and my jazz albums were in there. At the bottom was this album right here. It's a 3-record set, immaculate sound, heavy vinyl. And anyhow, so I saw that and I was kind of pissed off. I thought, well, I did not order this album and I don't want to pay for it. So anyhow, I looked at the invoice, and this album was not even listed on the invoice. So I'm thinking one of two things happened. Number one, well, maybe I was such a great customer during that year that they threw in a freebie, which I really doubt that. The second option is they just screwed up and accidentally put this in my package. Well, it was probably the first one. Like I said, it was not on the invoice, and I was not going to pay money to return an album I did not order. So that's my excuse. Maybe karma will get me, but that's my story. Classic album that you've never heard. I love Van Morrison. I have a couple CDs. Moondance, Enlightenment, I believe, in the middle 90s. And both albums are just fantastic. I've never heard a Van Morrison song that I did not like. But I have never heard Astral Weeks. And I don't even know what songs are on there. You know, I'm sure I've heard some of them, but I know nothing about that album. And I probably should pick that album up, since I like Van Morrison. This is number 9, Show a Guilty Pleasure record. I had a little trouble with this. I don't know. I just came up with this one. This is not an album I'm going to play to friends. It's the Beatles' first American album. Well, at least on Capitol. Meet the Beatles. This is the second album I ever bought in my life. So it's kind of a little sentimental. But I like that early 60s sound. But I'm not going to play it for other people. I'd probably play something later by the Beatles. Number 10. What is the strangest record you have? Boy, I looked through my collection and I couldn't really come up with a strange record. I've seen some other vinyl tags and people showed like their strange records. But I don't know. I have some Zappa, but that's pretty mainstream. I mean, he's a little strange, but so I'm gonna have to pass on that one. Number 11, Show a Picture Disc. I only have one picture disc. That's Mingus 1959 on Columbia. I ordered this online. They did not have any of the Columbia reissues. So, I don't know, I just took a chance and bought this. It was, and it arrived as a picture disc, and I was a little disappointed because I heard picture disc had bad quality. Anyhow, this has really good quality. It's probably an Eastern European DOL. Probably recorded from a CD or something, but it sounds really good, actually. Number 12, Best Posthumous Release. Once again, I looked through my collection, and from that, I believe it was an album that was recorded, and then the person died, and then this album was released. And I don't have any that actually fit that qualification. I've got tons of albums of dead people, but I don't think that's what the question is about. Number 13, what artists do you compulsively collect? Lately, since I've gotten into jazz, any Dexter Gordon album I see, I will probably buy. I think I've got 5 of his. I just like, I really like Dexter Gordon. As far as rock music or independent or whatever, I had all of Ben Queller. I think he's had 5 or 6 CDs or albums, whatever, put out. And He's like an indie artist. He does a wide variety, 70s influenced, does some of his old songs are Weezer-esque or Ben Folds, whatever. But and he's an analog dude. I think all of his albums probably were recorded on like 2-inch analog tape. So when his next album comes out, since I'm into vinyl, I will buy it on vinyl. Number 14, best blind buy. I'm going to go back to the late 70s. In the area I live in, a rural area, they didn't play much punk on the radio. But I always got Rolling Stone magazine, and one band's name always came up, The Clash. So I thought I would go ahead and buy the Clash album. This is their first U.S. release, The Clash. From the moment I put it on the turntable, I loved this album. And after that, I bought every album they ever put out. So I have pretty much the entire Clash releases on vinyl. They're probably maybe my favorite group of all time. So if I hadn't made that blind buy, I don't know. I probably would never have gotten into the Clash. Number 15, a blind spot artist. I had a little trouble, but I'm going to go with Phil Ochs. This actual album is probably, I'm not sure, 66 or 7. This has Outside of a Small Circle of Friends on it. Phil Ochs was a folk singer. This particular album, he got a little more, not pop, but a little more produced. I've always loved Small Circle of Friends. Really a good song, social commentary on modern American life. It's the lyrics I just love. So, number 16, what is your favorite album cover? Well, since I started getting back into jazz, I picked, this was one of the first jazz albums I bought. And I didn't know that much about Sonny Clark. Cool Struttin' by Sonny Clark. Beautiful album cover, taken in New York City. A chick walking along in high heels, and a guy over there with a trench coat, the car behind there. You just can't get much better than that. Most of the Blue Note albums, they usually had the artist, photo of the artist on the front. So this was kind of a little different. And this, I think this one is actually in mono. It's a reissue, but it's in mono. Number 17, a musician you have met. I have met very, very few musicians, at least famous musicians. But the one I have met is Rick Derringer. Probably 10 years ago, a son of a friend of mine opened up for him in Rick's hometown, Fort Recovery, Ohio. They had a festival. So Jordan opened up for Rick. And afterwards they had a meet and greet at a local tavern. So I met Rick, and seemed like a really nice guy. Well, anyhow, 10 years before this, actually I had met the original keyboard player for the McCoys, Ronnie Brandon. He played with the McCoys in their early days. And I think, I'm not sure how long he played with them, but Ronnie was in a group with a friend of mine, and a super guy. Man, he was really nice. Number 19, favorite album which nobody else knows about. Or no. Okay. Number 18, show a record with sentimental value. Okay, I thought I missed a question. This would be the first album I ever bought, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. First album, When I Die, You Made Me So Very Happy, Spinning Wheel. First album with David Clayton Thomas. I got this down in Memphis, Tennessee. My brother was in the Navy, stationed down there. And I got my first phonograph at the PX down there. My parents bought it for me, and I bought this album at the same time. So my first album had a lot of jazz on it, kind of like a full circle. Excellent album. I listened to that to this day. Number 19, favorite album which nobody else knows about. I'm going to go with 10cc, How Dare You. This was released in, I think, 76. I had bought the previous 10cc album. It was called The Original Soundtrack, the one with I'm Not in Love. And it was a pretty good album. A little strange in parts, but anyhow. So the next album came out, and I just went ahead and bought this. It's really hard to describe. 10cc, they crack me up. Their lyrics are nuts. I mean, some of the titles are Lazy Ways, I Want to Rule the World, which is nuts. I'm Mandy, Fly Me, Iceberg. Anyhow, 10cc was more or less two groups of two songwriters. One of them concentrated a little more on the pop side, like Things We Do for Love and stuff. And the other two was more in the artsy rock. I mean, they would still write songs crossing with each other, but it's and actually this cover was done by a graphics firm, I think Hipgnosis or something like that. And this Hipgnosis, they did the Pink Floyd Animals cover with that big power plant. Number 20, favorite album from a genre you don't know that much about. I don't know a lot about classical music. I want to get into it more, and I have bought a few. Personally, I like more the orchestration, the big symphonies, rather than smaller piano concertos or small groups. But anyhow, the first classical music I was exposed to were these two records. They were Switched on Bach by Wendy Carlos, 1 and 2. Synthesizer, the Moog synthesizer, one of the first ones. Excellent albums. I always loved the synthesizer. Became familiar with these albums. These are my brother's, actually. I inherited them. And he was over in Sicily at the time, stationed over there. So my parents and I went over there, and he had a really nice Sony stereo system. I mean, it was the best one I had ever heard in my life, you know. And he had a few albums, and those were two of the albums he had. So I want to get into more classical stuff, so I'll have to learn that. So this is Bradley. If you ever want to comment or subscribe, you're more than welcome. I'll see you later.